Hello, welcome to Hope Matters, a production of Mount Olive Lutheran Church here in Santa Monica, California. I'm Pastor Eric Shafer, the senior pastor here at Mount Olive. And each week we talk to an interesting person from around the community, around the country, and even around the world about the theme of hope, because we believe that hope matters. My guest today is Paul Oman, who is a working artist in Deer Park, Wisconsin. Also a Christian, and he blends his Christianity and artwork with his painting and watercoloring and workshops and a whole bunch of things. And so, Paul, let's just get into it. Tell me a little bit about your life and work as a working artist. You made this work as a full-time occupation.
Yeah, it's not something I really expected. It's been a lifetime journey to get to this point. I started out, I was going to be a veterinarian. That was my original plan. So I went to college studying animal science, switched over to biology and earth science after I worked at a Bible camp for a couple of summers. Loved working with kids. Didn't like advanced organic and biochemistry and calculus that much, so I made the switch. And I taught science for several years in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. But I'd always thought about going to seminary, so I started taking evening classes while I was teaching, and then eventually resigned my position and went to seminary full time and became a pastor in the ELCA in 2003 and served a congregation in northern Wisconsin for 8 years. And during that time, I started painting the Bible stories. I'd been drawing and painting ever since I was just a little kid. Just loved it, inspired by other artists when I'd watch them draw or paint. And it's just something, I used it while I was at seminary, but while I was serving, my main passion in painting is watercolor painting, and watercolor is pretty fast. It's a real quick medium. And I started to be able to see the process of getting from beginning to end very quickly in three simple values: light, middle, and dark, like contrast. And I thought, well, maybe I could paint the Bible story on a huge canvas in front of my congregation during a worship service and keep it very simple with just those values, but it'll read three-dimensionally from a distance. So I'd been in my call for 3 years, and I thought it was long enough so the people trusted me a little bit and I could try a few new things. And so on Good Friday in 2006, I decided to try this. I would paint the crucifixion scene, and my music director and the leadership team was completely on board. So they said, yeah, we'll do a choral cantata. So they sang a Joseph Martin choral cantata that sang the Good Friday story with some narration in between. Then we added a narration of Barabbas, first person narration. And this guy who had a great narrative voice read the story. He's a retired pastor, and he read the story. He was out of sight, but of Barabbas being released, Jesus going to the cross in his place. And I painted the scene up in front on this 80-inch by 60-inch canvas, a huge canvas, in about 45 minutes, just real simple. But it was the crucifixion scene behind the shoulders of the angry soldier with a spear, and he was coming out of the canvas almost at the crowd. And I tried it on that day because it wasn't a Sunday, and attendance was, in the 3 years I'd been there, wasn't real strong on Good Friday. So I thought it's pretty safe place to try something new, and Lent is a good time to try that too. A little did I know that would open the doors. And the following year, instead of having 30 or 40 people show up, we had 220 people in a little town of 500.
Wow.
And then it was 300 and 400 and so forth. But the really neat thing was people were coming with their children and their grandchildren, and I could hear behind me people talking and guessing the stories all throughout the Bible, until finally the painting came into a vision where they could see what it was. And I thought that is where the real value is this faith talk that developed as a result of doing this. So word of mouth traveled, and after serving there for several more years, I was getting requests to come and paint at churches and universities and different places. So I resigned my call then after 8 years, and that was in 2011, and I've been doing this full time ever since. It's taken me all over the country, different parts of the world to paint, and into schools, prisons. Wherever I get an invitation, I just have to take seriously that perhaps that's God's call, inviting me to go to this place. And that's where it has led.
Wow. So the typical job, so to speak, which you and I would call it a call, the typical individual call would be to do a live artwork as part of a presentation. Is that the typical?
Yeah. So most of the ones that I do, it's a live painting during a worship service. So churches will invite me to come in, usually for Sunday mornings, but sometimes it's a community event on Friday or Saturday or Wednesday night. And then really to try and use it as an outreach, but it becomes kind of a safe place for people to come to church, especially if they've left the church or haven't been a part of the church. To come and see an artist paint is, I think, less intimidating than showing up for worship on Sunday morning,
Wow.
wondering if you're going to dress correctly or act right or things like
Sure.
that.
Now, do you have a stick that you do as you paint? Do you take questions? Do they shout out comments? Well, how does that work?
Well, what I learned from my congregation that I was serving was to involve the talents of the people that are right there in your midst. That makes it become, it belongs to the people. That's what I'm trying to say. And so once I started doing this full time, I send a template ahead that's blank, and the people kind of fill in the template with their own script. So they'll choose the scripture readings. If they want to have additional narrations, they can choose that. They choose the music based on what they're comfortable singing or playing or on their talents in their church or community. And so the people are actively involved in this, and I just become one piece of the larger puzzle as a visual artist up there, while we have musicians and readers and
Wow.
like that.
Now, you know the text in advance. You're not surprised by it, right?
Right. It appears spontaneous to the audience, but for me, I work out all kinds of little sketches in advance. Like here's just a little one I'm working on at the moment. But I have these little sketches and they're small. I don't need to work out the big painting. If I can get it in proportion small, I can see it large scale. And then I'll have a little sketch down by my feet up front. So if I need to glance down there, I can. But it starts with a big blank canvas, and within 30, 40, 50 minutes, goes to completion. And it's a realistic scene. So I have a few pieces here. So here's one. I painted this down in Florida at one of the churches there, and it's the shepherds in the field.
Yeah, yeah.
The canvas is about 7 feet high by 5 feet wide. And this is just a reproduction of that particular painting. But with large brushes and acrylic latex paint, it just comes together.
Wow. And then what happens to that picture after you leave?
In almost all cases, the churches send me the size that they want based on the wall space they have. And then they keep
planning for it to stay somewhere permanently. That's great.
Well, sometimes, like this is another vertical, a Good Shepherd. I've done lots of variations of that, but here's a horizontal. And the prodigal son story and the 2 lost sons and the father running to them, or the feeding of the 5,000. And I don't always paint the same thing. In fact, I love painting something new every time. And so I put the fish and the loaves up close this time, and the Jesus and the young boy in the Gospel of John out in the distance further, overlooking the Sea of Galilee. But all those components can be rearranged depending on how they want the story told and what's the strongest emphasis in there. Maybe their congregation has a verse that's been with them for decades that means something to them. They'll ask me to paint that.
Cool. And then do you then sell, you make a copy of that you can sell on your website to other people, or how do you do that?
Right, so I'll do these reproductions. They're fine art giclée prints. And people from the church will often purchase one to have a memory of that day they'll take home with them, or to share with someone else. And that's just another piece that helps perpetuate the word in visual form out there. And it also helps me maintain, financially, I'm on my own for this, even though I'm still under call by the ELCA. It's entirely financially on my shoulders to make this work, and it's been working. So
before we get too far along, if someone wants to book you, how do they get a hold of you?
They just send me an email or give me a call, and they can go through my website, which is paulomanfineart.com, and paulomanfineart.com, and just contact the artist. You can send me a message there.
Wonderful, wonderful. Your work reminds me a little bit of what Ken Miedema does with music. You probably have experienced him over the years.
I've worked with Ken twice he's been on stage and I've been painting next to him. And Ken is so great. It's almost like he could see and already know what I was painting. We
Oh,
talked
yeah.
ahead of time, and he's describing my painting as it's coming to completion and in vivid detail almost. And that's just profound because, knowing he can't visually see it and the audience knows this, just puts it over the top.
Yeah. I'll tell you a story when we're done, another story about Ken, but it's a small world in the church too, Paul,
It is, it really is.
So this is a wonderful life's work and what you do. So I'm sure it's not a big leap for me to ask you where you find hope in your life and your ministry here.
Well, I mean, for me, I went to seminary because, there is no hope in the world except through Christ. And all these other things seem to promise hope or claim to be the real world out there. But to me, the real world is the gospel. And if, like in a painting, I attempt to paint the moment of hope, for instance, so the women coming to the tomb, not expecting there to be an open tomb there, but then they stand with different postures, shock, something like that. That's what each of these paintings is about. Here's the Road to Emmaus story. And the light is coming down on the stranger, Jesus talking, and they're about to experience hope once they get to their home and they break bread. But if what I paint can portray that moment where God's mercy is made known, or a moment of surprise of the grace of God, and it can give hope to someone else, that's what I search and study for in the stories and plan my sketches around. So when I paint that, hopefully there's this sense of surprise that happens, that God's mercy is for me too, for the people who are watching it.
Excellent. Thank you for this. And that's perfect. Yeah. Well, and thank you for being with us today on Hope Matters, Paul. This is just a perfect interview for what we're trying to do, and to give people a taste, and if they want more taste, they can check out your website, see some of your paintings, look at workshops, look at booking you. All those things are at Paul Oman Art. Paul, say it again, please. Your website. FineArt.com. All one word. PaulOmanFineArt.com.
And the ministry is known as Drawn to the Word. So just click on the Drawn to the Word tab.
Wonderful. That's great. All right. Our guest today on Hope Matters has been Paul Oman, a Christian artist, Lutheran ELCA pastor, who travels the country doing art with the Gospels and taking in mind the local context. What a wonderful ministry, Paul. Thank you for coming with us and sharing it today.
My pleasure.
This has been Hope Matters, a production of Mount Olive Lutheran Church here in Santa Monica, California. Each week we talk to an interesting person because we believe that hope matters, and we believe in a God of hope. Tune in again next week